Hi, everyone. This is Debbie Neiman with Hope Trust. We're going to cover comprehensive special needs planning. I will warn you, we're going to go over a lot of information. It is just the tip of the iceberg, and by no means is this intended for you, your specific individual case. This is a high-level overview of special needs planning. You'll see when we get through this that it's very complex and a lot of experts need to be involved, and each family's case is very individualized and different. So again, this is just to kind of get you to understand at a high level some of the different parts of this type of planning and hopefully get you some answers and all that. I will point out there is a Q&A area on here that you can, or a chat. I will look at those at the end, but if I do not address your questions or if we run out of time or any of that kind of stuff, please feel free to email me. I'll have my contact information up at the end. All right, so let's get started. So when you think about your loved one with special needs, what's the thing that comes to mind? Have you ever caught yourself saying, I can never die, especially if you're the primary caregiver? Or who's going to take care of my loved one and do all the things that I'm doing? Or do I have enough money? How much is even needed to take care of my loved one? Well, you're not alone. That's very common. And that's what this planning is going to address, not just making sure your loved one's taken care of, but so that they're taken care of in a way that you feel good and are not rolling over in your grave or when you can no longer do that type of care. But also making sure that your loved one has the lifestyle that you want so that today you can have peace of mind knowing that no matter what tomorrow brings, your loved one will be taken care of. All right, so when we do this type of planning, I want you just to keep in mind, the best time to start planning is now. Not when Junior turns 18, not when you get closer to retirement, not when ... If you are busy today, you will likely be busy tomorrow and the day after that. And also, none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. I mean, I don't want to sound morbid, but the best time to start planning is now. This is a long, complex process that continues to be dynamic and changing and evolving over time. So I would recommend today's the day to start. And then finally, planning is not a one and done. You're going to need to come back to this planning. It's not just a checklist. That's part of it, but then it's also reviewing and updating as life changes, people change, we get more information, all different kinds of things. So it's going to be on a reviewing basis too, so that we can make sure this thing is ready to go whenever it is needed to support your loved one with special needs. So today we're going to cover kind of the four main areas of special needs planning. We're going to talk about a couple of the commonly utilized tools in this type of planning and talk a little bit about building the village and different planning considerations. So let's get started. So how did I even get into this? Well, I am a parent of a child with special needs. This is my daughter, Cecilia. That's my little guy, Lauren. But Cecilia is 17 years old. She was born 3 months premature. She has cerebral palsy. She has a whole bunch of medical complexities that I could do an entire presentation on. She's in and out of the hospital, but her care is very intense. She will need supports her entire life. And one of the things that I worried about several years ago when she was little was, oh my gosh, what if I got taken out by the proverbial bus? Who's going to know everything that I know as her primary caregiver? And where do I have all that information stored? And who's going to make sure she's getting taken care of? And how much am I going to even need? And is there something special I need to do? Well, that's how I got into this because I went around and asked, and it seemed like, people could say different pieces, but I couldn't figure out how the whole thing worked together and if I had everything I needed to know. And that's really what we're here for today, is we want to make sure that you understand the different aspects because it is complex and it involves so many different experts that oftentimes it's siloed off. And so families don't know what they don't know. So when we're talking about comprehensive special needs planning, there's kind of four general pillars, if you will. First is financial. How much money is needed? What is it going to cost? Do I have enough? If I don't, how do I address that gap? All that kind of stuff. But before we can really figure out how much money, let's talk about, well, where can we get some of this stuff so we don't have to pay for it? That's where government benefits come in. The issue with government benefits is, generally speaking, one, you have to qualify due to the disability, but two, there's usually some strict asset and income limitations. When you look at those asset and income limitations, it's basically living in poverty. Well, none of us want to leave our family member in a life of destitution just so that they can have some supports. So that's where the legal aspect comes in. That's where we're talking about a special needs trust, so that those government benefits are protected, but we can supplement the government benefits and provide that lifestyle and those comforts that we want for our loved one. But then once you have all of that stuff, how does this trust and the assets in it and all that, how does that translate into what makes my kid tick? And what are the important things you need to know? And whoever's caregiving for them, how are they going to know all the tricks and stuff that we figured out over the lifetime of our loved one? And that's where the life care planning comes. So it really draws that ribbon around and ties it in a nice, pretty bow, so that those coming in behind you, the village, or I sometimes say the second string team, can really step into the role and do what you would want and make sure your loved one has the life that you envision for them. So financial, how do we figure out how much it's going to cost? Well, first we're going to look at the short, mid, and long-term goals. We need to know, look at the future. We need to consider, what do you envision for your loved one? This piece, it depends on the age of the individual. I know so many families I've talked to who just got a diagnosis, or they have a 3-year-old who just got a diagnosis with autism, or they just had a baby and they have Down syndrome, and they're saying, I don't even know what my kid's gonna, be able to do or whatever. So what we're gonna look at then is, what would you know that you don't want? Let's start there. And this is another piece that I think is really important when you sit down on an annual basis with your advisors. Let's really look at, okay, where's our kid in relation to typically developing peers of the same chronological age? Where's that gap? I know as parents that we are so hopeful for the future for our kids. And, our kids do sometimes develop at a slower pace than others, and maybe they will get there. But if you died tomorrow, and your child never developed a further day than where they are today, how would you feel with your planning? And so we're going to plan for the worst and hope for the best. And we're going to continue to review and dial up, dial down, dial back all of the planning that we're doing as we gather more information. No one has a crystal ball, but we can do a best guess estimate. So we're going to look at that. Where will they live? Who will they live with? Who's providing the supports? How much support do they need? It's really easy when you have a 3-year-old to think, okay, well, I have guardians set up, and they, my brother and sister, that's the aunt and uncle who live across town. Great. But it's another story when, well, what about when they become an adult? Are they still living with your brother and sister? And what happens when your brother and sister pass away? And so we have to look at all those things. Are we crossing state lines? There's so many different things to look at, and there's experts that can help with this, not just financial advisors. Sometimes we do need to bring in government benefits experts that can really look at what are the options out there, and what does your loved one qualify for? If they don't qualify for it now, maybe in the future. So we're going to look at all those things. And then what are the things that are important that give meaning to your loved one's life, or that are important that your loved one continues? Is it a family tradition, vacation? We've had clients whose kids have season tickets to their favorite baseball team. Those are kind of important things we'd want to know, so that we can make sure that continues on whether you're here or not. So Hope Trust has this platform, and there's different tools in it that you can utilize with your professionals, such as your financial advisor, to figure out that magical number of what is it going to cost? Now, we also have partnerships with companies, like I said, that can help you figure out, if you don't know what does it cost to support somebody like my child that has this disability, and we just don't know yet, or what does it cost? And we do know exactly their function level, but we have no idea where to start or any of that. You can sit down with your financial advisor. We have this tool called Meet Your Trust Objective. It goes through an itemized budget, literally thinking of things that most families forget, such as, hey, if your child has a disability that's neurodegenerative and they may be walking today, but will likely need a wheelchair by the time they're 30, we probably need to build in some some funding for accommodations for vehicles, for home, for travel, for supports, any of those kinds of things. So it's just different aspects of the budgeting. Our budgeting tool is a lifetime budget. So, you know, what it costs today for your loved one to live is not going to be the same in 10, 15, 20 years from now. And it's not just because of inflation. Is the aging process, do we see that markedly earlier in somebody with the disability you have? What are you providing for your child or your loved one that you don't charge for? I don't charge my daughter Cecilia to coordinate or care. I can tell you that with the amount of time I spend doing that, somebody is not going to be standing at my door knocking down to do that, to step into that role for free. You know, I don't charge her to take her to all of her doctor's appointments. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to really itemize and get nailed down, because that helps us figure out the need. And again, if you have somebody, our budget tool has so that you can mark different ages that you anticipate some of these expenses. Some expenses will go throughout their life, but you know, you may have, let's take for instance, Down syndrome that has a shorter lifespan of maybe, let's say 60, but has a higher incidence of early onset dementia. Well, memory care is really expensive. So you may have, you know, an early onset dementia at 50. So you may have a shorter lifespan, so maybe the entire lifetime expense isn't as much as far as daily needs, but if they need that kind of level of support for 5 to 10 years, well, then you're talking about a huge ticket item. And so you can input things like that. And so talking through that with your financial advisor who can, or with us, that we can help you get the different pieces into place with your financial advisor can help you build that budget. From there, you can plug in the different assets that you and your advisor are thinking about utilizing for the funding plan. So the funding plan is another piece that I find that many forget to think about. So I've talked to many families who are like, oh yeah, I did this part, but I haven't done that. Or they think or feel. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But again, that Mito tool will help analyze all that so that you don't have to think about, or you don't have to think or feel you have enough, but know that you have enough and have done analytics for that. One of the tools that we utilize oftentimes with special needs planning is ABLE plans. I get a lot of questions about these from families. They are not the end all be all, but they are a tool, one of many that can be utilized in special needs planning. ABLE plans were created recently in the last handful of years. I guess it's been a little bit longer than that now, time flies, but you have to have been, had a disability present prior to the age of 26 to open one of these. You can only have one. It's based on Social Security numbers. So unlike a 529 college savings plan that grandma and grandpa can set one up and mom and dad, the individual can only have one ABLE plan. The ABLE plan, the monies inside of it or the assets inside of it are not looked at by Medicaid. The first 100,000 is not looked at by Social Security when we're looking at SSI eligibility. And I'll get more into government benefits, kind of a high level in a minute so that you can understand all this a little bit better. The nice thing is that contributions by family and friends to an ABLE account are not deemed as income to the individual with disabilities. Just so you know, for SSI, if you have a checking account that individual is associated with, so like a rep payee account or a checking account or anything like that, if family and friends are contributing to that, Social Security says, oh, well, there's some income that they got. But if they put in the ABLE account, you don't have that. The contributions are post-tax from a federal perspective. So the money that goes in, once it's in there, it grows tax-free, comes out tax-free as long as it's used for the benefit of the individual. It is considered, what's considered an allowable expense is very broadly defined on purpose. Things that can be used for are to supplement government benefits. It can be used to pay for living expenses, or medical expenses, but it can also be used for promoting independence, job training, administration, caregiving, wellness, health and wellness, vacations, any of those things. So it's really broadly defined. So don't worry that like, oh my gosh, it's, you know, just an allowable disability expense. If you look at the definition, it's extremely broad. One thing I do want to point out about these, though, is that when the beneficiary passes away, if they were dependent on Medicaid, if they are in a state that has what's called a Medicaid payback, Medicaid potentially could put a lien on the account and get first dibs at what's left in the account upon the death of that individual to try and recoup some of the costs they paid for that individual. You can pay funeral and final expenses out of ABLE accounts. And if you are concerned about the Medicaid payback, if you are in it or your loved one's getting Medicaid services that way, then I would recommend keeping the balance a little bit lower. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides when we talk about how to complement the two and why an ABLE account, because that's the piece that this last part, the Medicaid payback, that gets people bristly. We'll talk about why you would want to utilize an ABLE account, because ABLE accounts can do things or pay for things that special needs trusts can't. So we'll talk a little bit how you complement the two together. But anyway, they're a great tool for when grandma and grandpa are to the point that they're like, hey, we want to do something meaningful, or family members. And you're like, my kid doesn't need another toy. They don't need more clothes. They don't really need anything, but you know, what can we do? Well, an ABLE account's a great way for family and friends to contribute. So all the states in green have ABLE accounts. If you are in a state that is gray, or you don't like your own state's ABLE program, that's okay. You can go to another state's program. There's just a few states out there who do not have, that do not allow non-residents to participate, but those are few and far between. Most states don't care. A few states do charge for higher fees to non-residents on their accounts. None of all these accounts, because they are investment accounts, you're limited to what the state offers to invest in, but through their program, but they do have some fees associated with it. So make sure you check that out. I will say that I had clients who they were in a state that their in-state resident fees were actually higher than their out-of-state resident fees of another state. So I recommend going to this website, the ABLE National Resources Center's website. It has so many answers. It's very thorough. You can compare different states' traits and everything else. It's ablenrc.org. They have a wealth of information, just about anything you can think of about an ABLE account on that website, and I would highly recommend going there. Okay, so government benefits. This is an area that most people know absolutely nothing about, or really don't, or misunderstand a lot of it. And then so much of it is because there's alphabet soup and so many names that sound similar, no wonder. And where it's funded or how and where it's regulated or governed is all confusing too. So this is kind of the down and dirty 30,000 foot explanation of some of the most common government benefits. We'll go through a couple scenarios after this, but just understand that it is a science in and of itself. So Social Security has several buckets under it, if you want to call it that. There's SSI, Supplemental Security Income. That is income to pay for the basics, very bare basics for an individual who has limited assets and limited income. SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, is a benefit for people that have paid into Social Security when they become disabled. To qualify for SSI, which is supplemental security income, you have to have asset and income limitations. In SSDI, you have to meet the definition that Social Security Administration gives for what they say is disabled. To be disabled, you have to have a physical or mental condition that prevents you from holding substantial gainful employment. This is if you're over the age of 18. If you're under the age of 18, that piece is not added on. But substantial gainful employment is defined as of 2021 as $1,310 per month. If you cannot earn $1,310 per month, and that is due to your disability that is expected to last more than 12 months or result in death, then you meet Social Security's definition of disability and potentially may qualify for SSDI. I'll talk about some different scenarios that allow somebody to draw an SSDI. Medicaid is health coverage for the poor. You have to have limited assets and income. So Medicaid, the threshold for Medicaid to qualify is $2,000 in total assets, not including one car or home. SSI, you have to when you do the calculation, it's usually making less than the federal poverty level. It's really low. But Medicaid waivers, this is a place that I saw many families miss the opportunity because they didn't know about it. And I'll be honest, I was one of those families until it was a social worker that told me, why isn't your daughter on this? So I have many families that have sat down with me and said, hey, we don't qualify for anything. And they're right. As a family, the family makes too much. The parents have too many assets and income or whatever. But the individual child may. Now, we're not always talking about a minor child, but we'll go into some scenarios. But for a Medicaid waiver, depending on the state, there are every state has Medicaid waivers, and it waives some of the eligibility requirements to qualify for Medicaid. So you want to look up HCBS, which is Home and Community-Based Service Waivers for your state if your child or your loved one is not getting it. They may qualify for Medicaid based on their disability, and that they may not, that you weren't aware of because they don't qualify for traditional Medicaid. Medicaid waivers can provide all kinds of supports and services. If you have private insurance, it acts as your secondary insurance and picks up a whole bunch of stuff that private insurance does not cover. My daughter's on a Medicaid waiver. Her father is an orthopedic surgeon. I work. There's no way she would ever qualify for Medicaid, not as a minor. She gets in-home supports and services, in-home nursing. It covers a whole bunch of stuff that our private insurance doesn't, such as accommodations or modifications to the home, to the vehicle. She's cathed. Catheters are not covered by our private insurance, but they are by the Medicaid waiver. So all different kinds of things. It was transformative for our family because it freed up a bunch of cash we were pouring out every month for her, in addition to providing us people and help so that we could be her parents instead of just her nurse. So again, you know, I talk very specifically about my own case, but even for families that don't have a child with medical complexities, we're talking about mental health issues. We're talking about autism. We're talking about IDD, you know, all different kinds of levels of things. Your child may qualify for these things or your loved one. So make sure you're looking into that. I've had some families say, well, we don't want to back our kid into a corner by getting them on that list. Well, I understand that. And if your child comes up for it, you can always turn it down, but you wouldn't want to take away an opportunity for them to be, whether it's supports or services. So I would definitely look into that because it can save you quite a bit of money. Before you start thinking like, yay, this is the solution to all our problems, Medicaid waivers generally have long wait lists. Not all states have them, or not all waivers have wait lists. Let me explain that. But most of the time there's long wait lists to the tune of 2 to 10 years. So again, getting your kid on there as soon, or your loved one as soon as possible, is the best case scenario. And then finally, Medicare is not just for old people. Medicare is health coverage also for people with disabilities. And again, in a couple slides, I'll explain that a little bit more. Anybody who has a child over the age of 3 and before the age of 21, public school services could potentially provide some supports. Under IDEA, they have to provide a free and appropriate public education, and that includes any related services or supports. So if you are have a child and you understand you may need an advocate to help you, but your school district, if your child needs OT, PT, speech, behavior therapy, all kinds of different things, because there's the expanded core curriculum, so that it covers more than just cognitive, you know, learning, traditional educational things. It's all of it, social, emotional, all that stuff. You could potentially have the school district paying for some of that stuff and providing it in the school setting. And again, that can free up some cash for other things that you would want to do. Voc services we see really once that child gets to be in the high school age or older. So that vocational services works on job skill training, finding a job coaching, some of those adulting skills, independent living, those kinds of things. And then finally, if we have any military on the call, either veterans or active duty, there are some extended supports and services that are provided through the VA and the military for those families that have a loved one with disabilities, a child or a dependent with disabilities. So making sure that you're aware of those things is really important. All right, so what will your loved one qualify for? Like I said, many people are leaving money on the table. And so let's try to maximize government benefits. Again, we don't know what government benefits will look like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They're not guaranteed, but let's maximize what's there, because that frees up cash so your loved one can have the lifestyle that they want, or the nice things and those kinds of things, or you can plan for your future. So SSI, how do we qualify for supplemental security income? If the individual is a minor, the entire household's assets and income are looked at, as well as the number of people living under that roof. That is how somebody is determined, if a minor is determined if they qualify for SSI. So generally speaking, you have to be basically living at the federal poverty level or below to qualify for SSI. However, once a child turns 18, mom and dad, just so you know, the federal government says you no longer are responsible for having to provide for your loved one, your child, because they're an adult. So your child could potentially, if they have a disability, be living at home. You could even have guardianship, and they may qualify for SSI if they're over the age, if they're 18 or older. If you do, to maximize that amount, the maximum amount as of 2021 is $794 per month for SSI. It is intended to cover the basics: roof over their head, basic utilities, and food on the table. If you charge your child room and board, which you can do through a lease agreement, and even do it on an IOU basis if you need to, while they're trying to get SSIs applied for. And again, this is once they're over the age of 18. That's $794 you could have coming in the door for your child each month if they're not working. And so there's some other caveats to that. So again, don't just be like, take this as this works for your situation. But again, I found that many families who realized that their child qualified for SSI, but were getting about 2/3 of it, was because the parents weren't charging room and board. Social Security Administration says, hey, if somebody's providing room and board for these people, then we're going to slash that their SSI benefit by 1/3. So you don't want to, you want to maximize that amount. And then there's nothing that says, because once you charge them room and board, you're actually acting as their landlord, if you will. The government doesn't care what you do with it after that. If you apply it towards what it actually costs them, or you could gift it into an ABLE account, which many families do, and start saving almost $800 a month for your loved one for the future. So again, you can see how these things can add up. Oops. Next is SSDI. So it's possible for your adult child to meet the definition of Social Security Administration's being disabled and still be working, because if they're making less than $13.10 per month and it's due to their disability, they could qualify for SSDI based on their own working history if they've contributed to Social Security and for enough time. It takes a while to earn enough credits to be able to draw from SSDI, but it's possible for your child to be working and getting an SSDI benefit based on their own working history. Now, if they're hardly making any money, their SSDI benefit is not going to be very much. And it's possible that they may not get any if they're getting SSI. But the thing that's important about SSDI is after 2 years of receiving a monthly benefit from SSDI, they automatically qualify for Medicare. And Medicare can be coupled, if they already have Medicaid or other insurance, it could give them broader coverage. So that's one benefit of that. Now, a lot of our kiddos either are never going to work, or they may not qualify for SSDI on their own working history, but it is possible for a child with disabilities to qualify for SSDI on mom or dad's working history. If mom or dad contributed to Social Security, it is possible, if that child had a disability present prior to the age of 22, for that child to qualify for an SSDI benefit based on mom or dad's working history. Now, there's some caveats to that. The child only gets the benefit when mom or dad is getting either an SSDI benefit or is drawing their Social Security retirement benefit. But still, that benefit could potentially be up to, not always, because there's a household maximum, but could be up to 50% of what that individual's full retirement benefit would be, Social Security retirement. So that could be the difference between $794 per month in SSI versus, let's say, $1,200 or $1,500 in SSDI. Now, it's not stacked. If your child's getting SSI, they will only get the higher amount. They will not get SSI plus SSDI, where it'd be the $794 plus the $1,200. It will be the higher amount of the two, but who cares? We want the higher amount. So also, if mom and dad both contributed to Social Security and mom and dad are both drawing equal amounts, whoever's the higher amount that's drawing, that's whose benefit will be used to determine the child's. It's also not a stack. So if mom and dad are each getting, let's say, $2,400 from Social Security retirement piece, the child's not going to get $2,400, $1,200, and $1,200 of each parent. They're going to get the higher of the two, just so you know. But again, 2 years after getting that benefit, they also qualify for Medicare. So if your child aged off your health insurance and Medicaid is their only coverage, Medicaid provides a lot of things, but a lot of providers don't accept Medicaid. And so that limits your choice, but most providers accept Medicare. So imagine if your child has both Medicare and Medicaid, now you have broader coverage and less out-of-pocket expense. So again, we want to make sure we're maximizing this. This piece is really important because most financial advisors don't know this. And so when they're talking to you about your retirement income planning and when to draw your Social Security, this may change that conversation. So make sure that you are aware of that, or that you're working with an advisor who knows special needs planning. When we're talking about leaving assets or inheritance to our loved one with disabilities or to anyone that may need to be dependent on government benefits, that's where a special needs trust comes in. So special needs trust needs to be drafted by somebody who knows what they're doing. And it's not just an estate planning attorney, it's somebody who knows special needs trusts. Now, our platform does generate or drafts special needs trusts. If you already have an estate planning attorney, I would ask them about, are they very familiar with special needs trusts? This is not the time to tap your brother-in-law, who happens to be a divorce attorney, to draft your special needs trust. This is not where you go to the employee benefits that you receive that includes legal services and have them draft your special needs trust for free. This is a very subspecialized area, and you have to have this set up correctly or all the planning kind of falls apart. So again, make sure you're working with a specialist and that it's set up correctly. Now, if it is set up correctly and utilized correctly, the special needs trust should not jeopardize government benefit eligibility. And so you may say, well, we don't care about government benefit eligibility. We have all the money in the world. That's not most families, but some families may say that. Okay, great. But who's going to provide those services? Sometimes when family's no longer here, but the loved one's still here, they need to tap into government benefits so they have somebody show up. And so how do they access that? That's through Medicaid a lot of times. And so do you want all that? That could be really expensive if you're private paying. So we want to make sure that we don't want to take any opportunities off the table. We don't know what it's going to look like in the future when, there isn't certain family members still here. So we just want to make sure we're protecting that. Special needs trust cannot pay for the basics. So anything that government benefits would normally cover cannot be paid for by the special needs trust. And this was the piece that I was talking about when I was talking about ABLE accounts. ABLE accounts can pay for those things without jeopardizing government benefits. And that's where we use the two tools together. Special needs trusts can fund ABLE accounts, and ABLE accounts can pay for some of the things that special needs trusts cannot. So very important thing that you can utilize the two and understanding how they can work together. I want to make sure we understand trust roles, because this is where I find a lot of families don't truly understand what they're asking their family members to do, nor does the family member understand the responsibility until it's too late. So the beneficiary is your loved one with disabilities who's going to benefit from what you're leaving in this trust. The grantor is who's creating it. The trustee is who administers or determines distributions and what's in the best interest of the beneficiary. The trustee has a legal fiduciary responsibility, which means if they misappropriate funds, even if done innocently, they can be held liable. Now, most of us don't want our family members to get sued because they thought that they were helping your loved one with disabilities, and it turned out that it violated POMS, which is a whole bunch of instructions that the Social Security says this is what can and cannot be paid for if you're going to have government benefit eligibility. You don't want that. I don't think most of us, and most of our family members are not experts on special needs trusts. They may have full-time jobs or families and everything else, and doing this on the side and trying to keep up with regulations and the changes and all that stuff, I don't think that's what most of us want. And I don't think most of our family members want that. I think what we want oftentimes is that we want to make sure that somebody who knows our loved one and understands them, make sure that things are happening and that the money's being used how we thought, right? Well, that's more like the role of the trust protector. The trust protector has no fiduciary responsibility. They cannot be sued for misappropriation of funds or messing things up. They can, however, determine if that trustee is doing a good job or not. And if they're not, they can fire them and find a new one. And so a lot of times when I explain these different roles, family members are like, oh, that's what I want my family member to do. I want them to be a trust protector, not a trustee. I would encourage you to understand the trustee roles and consider a professional for that. It is a lot of work, and it's a huge responsibility, and there's a huge liability with it. Hope Trust does provide trustee services. And again, I would highly recommend making sure that you're working with a company that really knows special needs trusts. A lot of banks are getting away from special needs trust administration because the liability is so big. So again, Hope Trust does provide that level of service for families with special needs trust. Taxes. This is a big one to talk about. I have yet to meet the family who says, hey, make sure when I die that a big chunk of what I want to leave behind goes to Uncle Sam. Special needs trusts do not get special tax treatment. They get typical trust taxation, and it is high. So anything that's income producing within that trust is taxed at a federally compressed marginal tax rate, income tax rate. And that is only just under $13,000 per year right now, and inside of a trust triggers the top marginal tax rate. So you want to think about your funding plan, not just part of it is, do we have enough, right? The other piece is how is this going to be taxed? These assets that we're putting inside of this special needs trust, how are they going to be taxed? And so that's where, again, you need to step back and talk to your financial advisor, your estate planning attorney, and a good tax CPA, and really come up with a good funding plan. So many families I would talk to would say, oh yeah, we did our special needs planning stuff. We added one of those special needs trust things for our loved one with special needs. We have it all done. Great. What's the funding plan? And most people would say, oh, well, the part that would have gone to junior goes into the special needs trust. Great. But is it tax efficient? Is it going to be enough? And so those are the questions we need to ask so that we can make sure. So again, working with a comprehensive team of experts, and oftentimes these experts aren't talking to each other. That's just how the industry has been through years. And that's where Hope Trust a lot of times can bring everybody together on the same, at the same table so that we can make sure this thing makes sense, not just little pieces. Anybody who's had complex medical care understands kind of, let's get the team together in one room and all hash it out together instead of, only doing the little micro part of each part of their piece of the puzzle. We want it all to come together very comprehensively. Okay, so your estate plan or your special needs trust can only do work with or direct those assets that are titled to it, or those that the special needs trust is named as the beneficiary. If you do the special needs trust and then you don't update your titling of assets or the beneficiaries and stuff goes directly to your loved one by name, we have a big problem. The special needs trust then it's just a legal document, and it's expensive, and it can't do what's not inside of it. So you just spend a lot of money on a piece of paper, basically. So make sure that you are updating that. And I would recommend that you do an audit of all of your assets and accounts with your advisor on an annual basis. Make sure that you didn't forget about an old 401k sitting out there that you named, your kids or whatever. And if you don't name anything, I just want to bring this up. If you don't have an estate plan in place, the state has one for you, and it goes like this. If you're married, everything goes to your spouse. If you don't have a will or estate plan in place. If you have, if your spouse is dead, then it goes to your heirs, your kids. And so, or it goes to the next in line, and there's this whole succession, and they get it in name. Government doesn't care. They do not care if that violates or will jeopardize your government benefits, which could be providing a residential home, caregiving, around the clock support, and you have to private pay for that. It can be a total mess. So making sure that you address this is really important. It's not just a gift to the loved one with disabilities, but to your entire family. I could sit here and tell you a ton of horrific stories that I got called about after the fact of families saying, hey, we heard you help with this type of planning. Can you help us figure this out? Because it's a huge mess. We can fix it afterwards, but it's not fun. And it's a long, expensive, drawn out process. So I just want to put that out there. And then finally, understanding that special needs trust, there's different types. A first party special needs trust, it's about whose stuff is inside of that trust. So if it's the individual with disabilities own stuff, a first party special needs trust. This is utilized a lot. Like, let's say there's a medical malpractice, that award that would have been used to pay to the individual who was injured, it goes into a first party special needs trust. Third party would be like what grandma and grandpa or mom and dad are leaving assets to the individual with disabilities. So it's whose stuff is funding that trust or going into that trust. Now here's the other key part about it. First party special needs trusts, when the individual with disabilities passes away, those assets go back to Medicaid. Third party special needs trusts, you don't have that payback. It goes on to whoever the successor beneficiaries are that you chose. And again, I will go back to most families don't. I have yet to meet the family who says, you know what, I want to make sure that we pay back for every single bit of Medicaid services that we provided, or that anything that's left over when my loved one dies that has disabilities, that it doesn't go on to the rest of my family or charity or whatever that needs to be. So again, making sure you're planning ahead is important. So things go, your assets or your family assets go to where you want. Another thing I'm going to talk about on funding plans. So think about what you're using to fund. Is it going to be liquid at some point? I had some families who were like, oh yeah, well, we were just going to put the family farm title into the special needs trust. Well, great. It wasn't an income producing farm and the child was not going to be able to live there. So I said, okay, so you're okay with selling the family farm that's been in the family for 4 generations? Well, no. Well, what is this land going to provide for this person? We need cash to pay for things. So think about, again, this is why coming up with a funding plan that makes sense is really important. All right, so let's compare a little bit, ABLE accounts and special needs trusts, because I get asked this all the time. Which one do I need? Well, they're not apples to apples. An ABLE account, again, you have to have had a disability onset prior to the age of 26, whereas special needs trusts, you don't have that issue. I will say first party special needs trusts, you have to be under the age of 65 to create, but third party, it doesn't matter the age of when they're created. ABLE accounts, really easy to set up. It's online. You do not need an advisor. You do not need an attorney. It takes about 10 minutes. That's if you're typing with one finger even. It's super easy. You self-certify, boom. There is limitations though on the contributions. So this is where families forget when they're like, well, why wouldn't I just get an ABLE account? You know, it's cheap and easy to set up. Well, the problem is because you can only contribute $15,000 per year. Most of us have more in our state or life insurance or real estate or whatever that's going to be more than that in any given year. So it is not a place to put that. And you can only put cash into an ABLE account. You cannot put stocks, you cannot put property, you cannot put real estate. So again, ABLE accounts are limited in what they can do. They do serve a role, but they're not the same, and neither are special needs trusts. So they're two different things. ABLE accounts, you have some limitations. One, if the person's dependent on SSI, you got to keep the balance probably below $100,000 because the first 100's not looked at. If you're not needing SSI, great, but you can, these accounts all have maximums. It depends on the state, but usually anywhere from about 300 to 500,000 is kind of the cap of what can be inside of an ABLE account. Again, if there's more being left behind, it's not going to work here. What you can use an ABLE account, very broad. Special needs trusts, you cannot use for anything that it's meant to, you'll hear them called supplemental needs. It's to supplement whatever government benefits would be providing. Taxability, like I said, ABLE accounts grow tax-free, come out tax-free as long as they're used for that loved one. Third party or any kind of trust, they're taxed pretty heavily. So making sure that you have an adequate funding plan, that makes a lot of sense. ABLE accounts, there may be a Medicaid payback. Again, that varies by states. A lot of states are removing that because it was holding people back from opening them, but make sure you check that out. And special needs trusts, if it's a third party, you don't have a payback at all. It goes to the successors you want. Finally, one other aspect about ABLE accounts is that if that individual with disabilities does not have a guardian or conservator of their estate, then they have full access to that ABLE account as their own once they reach age of majority. So if that's both a good and a bad thing. For those that are not financially or cognitively or mentally able to handle the money, that could be an issue. For those that have a guardian, you don't have to worry about it. But for those that, let's say somebody has a neurodegenerative disability or physical disability, but cognitively they are fine and can manage their money and everything. Well, a special needs trust, the beneficiary cannot be their trustee. They have to have another trustee. So anytime they need something, they have to go to the trustee, which acts kind of like the gatekeeper, to make those arrangements to pay out of the trust. An ABLE account, however, the individual can access themselves and utilize the monies inside of it. So that's where, again, if you're needing to foster independence, if you want to, for somebody in the scenario I just gave you, an ABLE account complemented with a special needs trust really could be beneficial for that person. So they don't have to go ask every time they need something or want something. All right. So if you have somebody who has a bunch of medical issues or behavior issues or, cognitive impairments, or maybe they have mental health disabilities, and so trying to get all the information out of them may be challenging, or they may not be very forthcoming with, oh, I have a drug addiction problem and I tend to lie, and so that I can get the money that I need to go buy the drugs that I want and all this stuff, or they have schizophrenia or any of those kinds of things. How we get to make sure that, one, that what we leave them helps them, doesn't harm them, and two, that it actually translates into what we want for them. The special needs trust isn't going to say, well, this is who this person is, this is what gives them meaning, this is what makes them tick. It's going to be another document. It's not a legal document, but a life care plan can tell you everything and anything you would want to know about this person. Think of it as an instruction manual for the individual with disabilities. For my daughter who's nonverbal and can't tell you, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. Oh, these are the issues that I have. Here's the concerns. These are the tricks that my mom figured out after taking care of me for 17 years. Where is that information stored? When you ask a primary caregiver where all the different tricks and nuances and everything from figuring it out over a lifetime of caring for somebody, where it's stored, oftentimes you hear like, oh, well, I have the meds on a piece of paper, but we just added one last week. I haven't gotten around to adding that to the list yet. And this one med is filled at this weird pharmacy over here. And then we have the providers at this hospital, and then therapy comes over here, but there's this one therapist over there. And then, oh yeah, don't start an IV here. And Junior, who has autism, takes his meds great, but he needs one bite of peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and you better give the medication at 7 o'clock, because if you do it at 7:01, then we have a problem. Oh, and it needs to be creamy peanut butter. Where is that information stored? I can give you a personal experience of my own child that it's all in my head, but her dad was off work one day a few years ago and said, oh, I'll take her to that doctor's appointment. Fantastic. And 3 hours later, he says, we're 30 minutes out from the appointment. We live in a city that it takes no more than 30 minutes to get anywhere. I'm like, where are you? He had driven her across the state to go see a physician she had seen 5 years prior. He didn't even know who her current physicians were. I almost had a heart attack. But as we were sitting there talking, I thought, well, why would he know this stuff? So I'm the one who takes care of it all. So again, getting all that information aggregated and organized, not just the things that need to happen, but all the other tricks and quirks and nuances. Who's coming in behind you to provide this or to support or to make sure that your loved one's taken care of? Where is that information? It's usually strewn all over and half in your head. If you're not here tomorrow, we have a major issue. So A lot of times when you're working with an estate planning attorney, you'll hear about a letter of intent. A letter of intent is kind of like, here's my very high level general vision for you or for my loved one with disabilities, but it doesn't get into all the different nuances and things that change constantly for a loved one. We need something that's dynamic and easy to access, but limits access, get everybody that's involved in this person's care on one platform so they can collaborate together, but not everybody needs to see everything. And that's where Hope Trust really can come into play. We have a portal, an online portal, it's secure. Each user can be granted specific access so they only see what they need to. But this way you can get the estate planning attorney, the CPA, the financial advisor, all the family members that are involved, the circle of support, the caregivers, the PCA, the residential care facility, the nursing facility, the therapist, all of them in one place working off the same document. I can tell you just with my daughter's own medications, this has been a life-saving thing for us because I'm divorced. And so meds are constantly changing. And where do I have that stored? Well, we were doing it on a piece of paper if I forgot to add it. Now I just open up the portal because it's mobile as well, make that change as we're sitting in a doctor's appointment. Dad has access, so he sees it immediately. Has a document vault. Where are the documents saved? Whether it's guardianship paperwork, social security cards, birth certificates, the most recent IEP, maybe medical records, whatever, you can store it here. And that way everybody's working from the same, everybody in the circle of support is working from the same information. And so it just gets everything aggregated, organized, and in one place. The other piece is our life care plan has a 6,000 question database. Nobody answers all 6,000 questions, but when I think about the different nuances and tricks for my daughter, there's some things that are glaring and obvious that I think right away, like somebody needs to know this. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that are just second nature to me that I would never think to tell somebody until we're in a situation and they're like, well, I didn't know that. Our database asks those kinds of questions to pull the things out that you don't even think about, but that would be really helpful for the next person to know who's going to come in and provide caregiving, be a supporter of your loved one, and those kinds of things. So again, it gets all that information, their history, their schedules, everything you could possibly imagine, and puts it in one nice form. All right, so some final considerations when we're talking about this planning. I'm trying to be cognizant of our time. It takes a village, and it's complex, and it's a lot of experts, and that's before you talk about all the family members and the dynamics and the friends and the caregivers and everything else. So it's a lot. It takes a village. It's going to take a lot of people. Parents, I want to point out to you that what you are providing for your child will probably take several people to replace. Period. I think families forget about that piece of it. We do it because we love our children, right? And sometimes we're talking about siblings too, but it may take multiple people. So be prepared for that, and also build that into the budget. There may be several people. It does not need to all fall on one's shoulders. Somebody who's the guardian probably shouldn't also take on the role of trust protector and who knows what else. So making sure you're spreading the wealth, not just with hiring experts, but also if you have family and friends involved. Not everybody's going to be able to step in and do exactly what mom and dad are. Oftentimes I find that siblings, adult siblings, don't even realize, they say they're going to do it all until mom and dad are gone. And then they're sitting there struggling with trying to keep up their career, their marriage, their children, and supporting their sibling and saying, I thought I understood how much time and responsibility is this, and this is so much more. So again, trying to spread that out and lighten the load a little bit, because we're all human. The whole planning process is a process. I use that word over and over, which means it's not a start and a finish, but it's a process of continuing to tweak and update and everything to make sure this thing is ready to go, but also continues to evolve as the individual changes and life circumstances change. And then finally, I can speak very personally as a parent myself. I understand, I still to this day remember the diagnosis for my daughter when we were told she had cerebral palsy. It's a sucker punch to the stomach. The whole world drops away, and you just focus completely on that child and giving them every opportunity, therapy, whatever, to try and maximize their potential and help them. It's really important, parents especially, to put your own oxygen mask on first. If you do not plan for your own future, retirement, long-term care, disability, if God forbid that would happen to you, you're not going to probably have anything for your child to inherit when you pass away. And then we have a bigger problem on our hands. So again, stepping back and looking at the whole family dynamic and picture is really important, and working with an advisor who really knows, understanding that special needs planning is a big chunk of that, but that's a piece of the entire comprehensive financial and estate plan. So again, I just encourage families to really, I understand that every day it's sometimes we're just trying to keep our nostrils above the water level because we're so crazy busy. But this is where if you take one step today or tomorrow and just work on that, or work with a team that can help you, such as Hope Trust, to help you figure out, okay, what do you have in place or don't have in place? And no judgment if you don't. I get it. Some days you're just, or years, you're just surviving to try and get to the next 5 minutes. But take a step back, take a breath, and let's sit down with somebody that can help you say, okay, these are the things we need to get in place. Let's prioritize them and let's break it down into manageable chunks. We don't have to do it all at once, but let's take some baby steps. And in a year from now, we'll be a lot closer to where we want to be. And a year after that, a lot closer. I can guarantee you, if you do nothing, it will not turn out how you would want. That I can guarantee you. So again, all right, so here is my contact information. I can see there are some questions, so I'm going to answer those. If I don't get to, we have 5 minutes left. If I don't get to your questions, please feel free to email me. If any question is too terribly specific, I am not going to answer it, but I will try to get to these questions that are up here. Let's see. So one of the questions was, can you use a special needs trust to pay into an ABLE account? And the answer is yes. So that's where I was talking about using the two tools to complement each other. The ABLE account can pay for things such as rent, mortgage, basic utilities. It can pay for much more than that, but the special needs trust cannot. So this is where we see, like, let's say your child is living in an apartment and they're getting SSI. Well, $794 is what the maximum you can get. Let's be honest. Where can you live in this country and live in a place that, you know, at a lifestyle that you would want or feel comfortable with, where rent or mortgage payment is less than $794 plus your basic utilities, and that still covers groceries to have food on the table? It doesn't really actually cover the real cost of that. So that's where if you were to supplement it by paying that with the special needs trust, we have an issue. But if you have the special needs trust pay into the ABLE account, and the ABLE account is used to pay for those things, we don't have a problem. There's no problem with messing up either Medicaid or SSI. So that's how you use the two together. Since each state's benefits are different, do you guys have a way of assessing each state's individual government benefits, programs, requirements as policies are updated or revised? Yes. So we personally do not do a government benefits analysis, but we have a partnership with the company. So families can come to us and we can get them set up to do that kind of cost analysis, benefits analysis, looking at what those different options are and also what the different rules are for them, because they do vary by state. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I'm reading the questions, and it's just me doing this presentation. So, okay, so paying for different professionals out of the special needs trust, if that's to, if that is being utilized to benefit the individual who is the beneficiary of the special needs trust, absolutely. Whether it's administration, whether it's somebody who's paying the bills, whether it's a trustee, you can pay attorneys that need to be involved, accountants and everything out of a special needs trust, generally speaking. We do not send out our slide deck per se, but we will, everybody who registered for this presentation will get a recording, if not this one very similar to it of this presentation, so that you can go back and listen to it multiple times. I do know that I just packed in so much information. There's just so much to know. And then let's see. So one of the questions I have here, and this is a great one, is that we have a family member with who's high functioning, but has a disability, Should they be involved in the life care plan? And I would say yes and no. It depends is really the answer. So yes, in that you want them to weigh in, right? How much are they independent? And our life care plan actually has a section that the beneficiary can actually put in their own information that doesn't necessarily have to be seen by mom and dad. So, but mom and dad should probably also have a section, and we have that as well, to weigh in and say, hey, Junior may say this, but this is actually where our concerns are. And so I do think that those that are higher functioning, yes, I think it's very important, because there's aspects of the life care plan that isn't just about their functional level, it's about what's important to them. Do they want to work independently? Can they drive? Is that a goal of theirs? Is that even feasibly possible? I think it's important for us to step back and hear what they want for their life. I had a family member who said, my child is always going to live with a family member. And the adult child was saying, no, I want to have my own apartment and have like some kind of support system in place, but I want to live on my own. Well, let's talk about what are the pros and cons, and what are the concerns here, and is it feasible if we get enough supports in place? So I do think having them weigh in is really important. It'll go smoother. We want to make sure that we're supporting our loved ones as much as possible, and sometimes that does mean promoting some independence where appropriate. So I would definitely encourage families to involve their family member when appropriate, to find out what are their dreams, what is important to them. You may be surprised at what you hear. All right, let me see. I think that is all the questions. If there are any more questions, again, here's my contact information. We at Hope Trust provide several areas of service. Like I mentioned, trustee services, all of these are standalone too. We have our life care plan, our platform. We have an interdisciplinary team that provides trustee services as well as concierge services. We do mandate that the life care plan be included if you are going to work with us, because we can't possibly know everything that you know as a caregiver or family member. So we need to have that information, but we provide concierge services. So if it's case management, care coordination, whatever that needs to be, making sure that your loved one's taken care of in a fashion that you would want. The other piece to that is the trustee services. So again, we have an interdisciplinary team of not just bankers, trust officers, legal counsel, financial advisors that work with your financial advisors, but we also have clinicians, social workers, nurses, psychologists, and we really have the clinicians really involved in that comprehensive interaction and acting as liaisons, so that when a distribution is requested, or when somebody's calling and freaking out, that we can say, instead of, okay, we'll just make the distribution and process it, but that we make sure, okay, wait a minute, hold on. Do we need to ask some more questions? Is there an intervention that needs to happen? What's going on? So we do provide that level of service. Anyway, please reach out to me with questions. Please reach out to me if you need referrals, and please reach out to me to learn more about Hope Trust services. We'd love to serve your family. Take care.